What is going on, everyone? Phil here, and welcome to KO Gaming for my first impressions video on Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, for the last couple of weeks you've probably been hearing the buzz from mainstream reviewers and as well as some independent ones praising this game, the new Sony exclusive for the PlayStation 4, as being a Game of the Year contender for 2017, a game that's going to be hard to knock off of that pedestal, and some people have even gone as far to say that this game is going to be the example to which all other open world style adventure action games will be held up to for the next several years. Now, I have played this game for about 10 hours within the first day of its release, and I have a lot of direct comparisons to make between this game and some other solid games that have been out over the past several years. I have some positives and negatives to talk about, and I also want to address my thoughts on whether or not I think this is really as great as all the other guys are saying it is, so here we go. First off, I don't think anyone's going to argue the point that Horizon is a beautiful looking game on the PlayStation 4. Even me playing it on the standard vanilla, not the Pro PS4, this game looks really gorgeous. Lots of detail, huge, beautiful environments, a game where when you see something out in the distance, a lot of the times you can actually go there and do stuff in that area, which is pretty damned cool. I said this about Final Fantasy 15, and yeah, it's kind of the same for Horizon Zero Dawn. I like that aspect of the game. The fact that there's tons of different graphical effects, lighting effects. The game is very pretty. And yes, for the most part, it runs at a solid 30 frames per second on the PS4. There are some exceptions during heated combat when there's a giant enemy coming at you and you're dodging out of the way. Sometimes the game may slow down a bit and you may see a little bit of dip in frame rate, or I noticed a couple times walking into the larger cities that there was a little bit of a chop up. But besides that, for the most part, it is a solid 30 frames per second, beautiful, gorgeous graphics. And I actually have to call out 2 years ago, the Order 1886, a game that said, oh, look at the gorgeous graphics of our game, but that's why our game is so confined. It's because we had to really focus on making these movie-like realistic graphics. Well, I hate to say it, Horizon Zero Dawn has them, and it's an open world game, so that excuse just doesn't cut the mustard anymore. Story-wise, Horizon's story is actually one of the best of recent memory, at least for the snippets of it that I've gotten in the first 10 hours of gameplay. For pretty much the first 3 hours, you're going through this kind of backstory segment, explaining the main character's history and backgrounds, learning the controls of the game, and it's not until hour 4 that you actually go out into the open world and are able to delve into the more intricacies of the gameplay of the game. I like that, and I'll be honest with you, the story is one of the main things that's hooked me and wants me to keep playing the game. I'm not going to spoil it whatsoever because I feel the story is one of the better things about Horizon. So if you want to check out the game yourself, don't worry, I'm not spoiling it in this video. But I do want to say it's great, it's fun, it's gripping, and it's probably one of the main reasons that most people are going to end up liking this game. Now let's talk gameplay, and this is really where I have to draw a ton of parallels between Horizon and a lot of other games as of late, because in a lot of ways, Zero Dawn actually feels like a game that took the best elements of other existing games and franchises and kind of cut them straight out of it, taped them together, and made them into a coherent whole here. For example, there's going to be certain missions where you're investigating someone who's missing, or maybe you're following a trail, and this looks incredibly similar to using Witcher Sense from a couple years ago in Witcher 3. I mean, it looks almost identical, and the whole gameplay mechanic is utilized pretty much the same exact way. There's lots of these investigations in the game. The actual gameplay when it comes to combat is incredibly similar to the recent Tomb Raider reboot series, where you use a bow and arrow and a series of melee weapons to attack enemies. You're going to be looking for critical weak points to hit to weaken them so that you can actually down them. Yes, you'll be having crafting like crazy, picking up certain items from the environment and using them to create new ammo and different bombs and traps that are going to have your enemies get caught up and make them easier to defeat. I would also compare this to Far Cry Primal from a couple years back, where that game you were also doing the same kind of crafting, only it was a first-person kind of a deal. It almost feels identical to the gameplay of those two games. Now, not to say that that's necessarily a bad thing. In a lot of ways, the gameplay mechanics of those games are actually quite good, but it does need to be said that it kind of feels like they literally lifted the gameplay from those two games and put them together into one here, and some people are going to like that, and some people who maybe have played those games in the past are going to say, well, I kind of wish they did something a little different. I mean, the little weaknesses on the metallic enemies in the game are very similar to those, say, in like the Lost Planet series or other games games where you're just hitting for the weak point, and the bow and arrow mechanics are literally identical to Tomb Raider. So yeah, it works, it's functional, and it's competent, and yeah, it can be fun at times, but if you've already played these previous games, you may feel a little bit like this is more of a rehash than anything else. In addition, the looting system, again, incredibly similar to games, say, like Tomb Raider or Far Cry, where you're going to be constantly looking around the environment for things to harvest. When you kill an enemy, you're constantly going to be grabbing loot off of their bodies. And yes, you're going to have these optional caves and different objectives and locations where you're going to be exploring, killing enemies, but also looking for hidden treasures and items that you can either sell for a lot of currency at a vendor, or you can use to craft some of the best equipment in the game. Yeah, again, incredibly similar. If you don't like this kind of gameplay when it comes to you have to fully explore areas and look around for loot so that you can create the rarest stuff in the game, this is probably not going to be your cup of tea. But if you're someone who's looking for that kind of stuff and you don't mind exploring a big open world for all of the little quirks and things that have been hidden in it, you're probably going to like it. Now, the quest structure is set up in a way that you could just follow along the main quest, and yeah, eventually you'll probably run into a few troubles if you don't end up having the better armor, or you don't level up enough that you have enough HP to tackle the higher level enemies. But if you really want to be streamlined, it seems like you could just run straight through the story and you're fine. But then you're missing out on a ridiculous ton of side content in the game that seems to be greatly varied. Some missions are typical kind of RPG style fetch quests, again a la games like Witcher 3, where you talk to an NPC, oh no, someone's missing, or I need this item that I dropped out in the field somewhere. You go to find it, you end up fighting a bunch of generic enemies, you either rescue this inept person who got injured out there in the wild, or maybe you find the item and then you trade it in, you get experience points, you get a reward, yada yada yada. It's the same kind of cut and dry formula you would expect. But then there are some unique locations like the cauldrons, these hidden areas that are these technological caves. I won't spoil what they are or what they do, but they're pretty unique and interesting, and probably some of the best side content in the game for me so far. In addition, there's these really tall necked, I believe they're called long neck robots that look like giant giraffes that are pretty fun to figure out how do I run up and find a way to get into a high point and scale this thing. And then when you actually do, it's kind of, it serves as like the watchtowers from Assassin's Creed, where once you're at the top and you use your eagle vision, all of a sudden you can open up the map and see a giant area around it. So again, yet another gameplay mechanic kind of taken from another established and successful gaming franchise. I think you're getting the picture here when I'm telling you that Horizon Zero Dawn is basically taking the best parts of other things and slapping them together. So you've got a great story, really impressive visuals for the PlayStation 4, a fun open world to roam around with gorgeous environments, and a combination of gameplay from great games such as Witcher 3, the Tomb Raider reboot franchise, Far Cry Primal, as well as some exploration mechanics and things from other franchises as well. And you might say, well, what's not to like? Well, I'm going to be completely honest here with everyone. I'm really gripped by Horizon's story. I would love to keep playing this game and flesh out the story, but I really feel that if I just do the main missions and I don't do the side content, that I'm kind of missing out on a lot of what was intended to be experienced in the game. So I have been taking the time to do it, but quite honestly, outside of just those cauldron missions that I mentioned, pretty much all the other side content of Horizon Zero Dawn feels exactly like the side content of all the other games that I mentioned here. Busy work. It seems like it's gameplay that doesn't necessarily have meaning, and it's just meant to be put in there to say, oh, there's side content in the game. It doesn't essentially add much, if anything, to the game. And that's kind of sad. And also, that's kind of how I have to kind of describe in general the gameplay of Horizon Zero Dawn. Yes, it does take great elements from other games that work, but it combines it into this kind of feeling of just kind of mediocrity for me. Now, in any aspect, does any of the gameplay of Horizon Zero Dawn stand out as outstanding or original or fun or addictive? Like I said, if you've played the Tomb Raider games of recently, or if you played Far Cry Primal, you've played this before. The only problem with me being I did play those games, and guess what? After about halfway through each of them, I got incredibly bored because it was the same gameplay over and over and over again, and that's what it seems like, at least in the first 10 hours, when after that first 3 hours of story, I've now done about 7 hours of actual open world gameplay. It almost seems to me that that's what they're going for. Yeah, you're going to constantly be doing the same kind of combat, the same kind of fetch quest, the same kind of exploration that you've done in all those other games, and there really hasn't been one definitive thing in this game that I could say, wow, that's original, and I I've never done it in another game before, and it blows me away. And in addition, I couldn't tell you that any of the gameplay mechanics implemented in this game taken from other games have been improved. The bow and arrow feels like the bow and arrow from Far Cry or Tomb Raider. The actual loot system feels like the loot system from other games. That investigations feels like you're playing Witcher 3. None of it adds anything to it and says, here's our unique spin. It's just kind of, here's everything taped together from everyone else. And I don't necessarily know if that's something that you could say is an amazing, blow your mind, new standard for open world games. Yeah, it's an okay game. Yeah, it's certainly passable. And with the insane amount of content that seems to be in it, if you do all the wandering around and side content, sure, it's definitely going to be a bang for your buck and a good value. But right now, the only thing standing out for me in this game is the story and the visuals, and I'm sorry, that's not Game of the Year contention for me. You need to have a complete package, and right now, from what I'm getting out of Horizon Zero Dawn, it's good, but it doesn't necessarily seem to be to that upper echelon caliber that I would look for in a Game of the Year nominee. So, for my first impressions, I do like the game, but I'm certainly not bowled over and massively impressed. I'm not kissing the game's butt, and there are times when I'm finding myself a little bit bored and full of tedium because I'm kind of doing the same stuff I've done in other games before. I wish there was something original about this game. Right now, I can't really even mention one thing because I've done it all in other games. I just want the story to continue. That's kind of a shame, and I think that a lot of people right now, sadly, buying into the hype of all these mainstream reviewers, or it could be that maybe they didn't play those other games, and so this feels fresh to them. Maybe they didn't do those bow and arrow mechanics in Tomb Raider or whatever, and so to them this is the first time they're experiencing it. Then I could understand why you would say this game is original and different in Game of the Year, but for me it's kind of like been there, done that. They definitely did their homework when making this game, but this is almost like the ultimate how to play it safe. Don't take risks, don't take chances, don't do anything original, take the best stuff from other games, tape it together, wash, rinse, repeat, and here's your $60 release, and I don't necessarily know if I agree with that. Well, that's it for my impressions on Horizon Zero Dawn, everyone. I sure hope that you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please consider giving it a like here on YouTube. Please consider subscribing to KO Gaming for other videos like this in the future, and please check out the video description where you can find a link to my ongoing raw playthrough of Horizon over on my DSP Gaming channel, as well as some fun links like a Loot Crate discount code and a link to my Patreon. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time right here on KO Gaming.